All right, let's get this party started, everyone out there. How is everyone doing? My name is Vaibhavv Ali, and this is Aura 8. We go live every single weekday, and we talk about what's happening in the market. We bring in some amazing people. Every day we do this. The objective is to bring in people who actually are in the forefront of shaping the future. The future which is uncertain, the future which is rewarding, the future that is, that perhaps will make all of us very, very uh, rich, very happy, and at the same time, very relaxed. So I hope all of us listening to this are going to be a part of our upcoming videos. Today we have Raymond, who is joining us. He earlier worked, with the Malaysian government. He's a bit late, so I'm going to hold the fort till then. And in the evening, we are going out with the legend, the crypto godfather. We go live with him every weekday to talk about what exactly is happening in crypto and in Bitcoin. So that will be a very interesting conversation, and I recommend everyone to come down and be a part of it. But right now, this is where the party is getting started, right? We have earlier spoken about RWA, but I personally never thought of the angle till I was, looking for speakers about Islamic finance in RWA. Now, whether you like it or not, whether you believe in it or not, Islamic finance is really big around the world. There are people who absolutely do not want to be a part of anything that has an interest to be paid. So, what do people like these do? They use Islamic finance that actually helps them to be able to use that money in the right manner, to use uh, the principles of Islam in a way that actually supports people and the community. And mind you, people who believe in Islamic finance or Muslims are massive, right? So this conversation today might tend towards a particular community, but I think everybody should be paying attention whether you are a part of that community or not. The only reason being that there is a lot of uh, money to be made with the Islamic principles, and soon I'm going to have Raymond join in. Raymond, I can see you. If you can turn your camera up, I'm going to call you. Yeah, you're up on the stage, but you'll have to turn on your camera, and I can't hear you too. So
Hi, hello. Okay.
yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, my camera is on though.
Uh,
That's all.
you have to go to the setting and see.
Yeah, look at it.
Okay, I can see you.
Ken?
Yes, Raymond, how's it going? How is the KL traffic?
KL traffic is, something else. We have to discuss that at some points. I think we could make a run for it for Bangkok traffic as well, man. We could compete.
Really? Well, I come from Bangalore and I live in Dubai, and I was thinking that maybe I have taken care of that entire zone. But all right, welcome to the live. Today we are exploring what could be one of the biggest mega trends at the inception of at the intersection of Web3, traditional finance. Not really. We are talking about Islamic finance, the real world assets meeting Islamic finance. Joining me is someone who's been at the center of Malaysia's digital economy's push. He spent 5 years at MDEC. The Malaysia MDEC is Malaysian Digital Economy Cooperation, first as the CMO and then as the senior vice president and the chief digital investment officer. When he helped shape the community and the country's blockchain, Web3, and digital investment strategy. Now he works as an independent digital strategist and as an investment consultant and advisor. and one of the clear voices on how to tokenize in the space of RWA that can actually work with Islamic principles of the Islamic finance that could create a real and a compliant and most importantly a scalable impact. Well, Raymond, welcome once again. The first thing that I want to ask you is, can you break down what is Sharia? I'm sorry. Could you break down what is Islamic finance? Because though I'm a Muslim myself, I perhaps only know like the very basic one. But could you just explain it to us so that we all understand what is Islamic finance?
So, let me put a caveat out there, right? I'm not an expert on Islamic finance, but the understanding about Islamic finance is firstly, it's an alternative system of finance to the Western conception of finance, right? And that is a trust based or principle based.
I'm sorry, Raymond, I've lost you. Hmm. Raymond, I've lost you. If you can hear me. I'm sorry, guys. Trying to figure out what needs to be done, but clearly we have lost Raymond right now. Let me send him a message. Okay, I'm guessing his internet, I think his phone went off because he just came from outside. So we'll wait for him to kind of get it charged and be back. Till then, for everybody watching, let's, uh, the law that we will be talking about is Sharia law. Uh, and it'll be a very interesting conversation. So I want everybody to just stick out there and see what needs to be done. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Okay, I think we're going to have him in a bit. But if anybody has any questions that you want me to ask Raymond, go ahead and share it on the comments. Would love to uh, take it to him. Still waiting for him to kind of charge his phone and be back in action. Really looking forward for this conversation. Stick around, guys. Stick around. Stick around. We'll begin this conversation now. Okay, Raymond is back. Waiting for him to turn on his camera, and then we can get this conversation started. Okay, Raymond, it says the device is not connected. If you can hear me, and okay, I think yes, now I can see Raymond. Yes, must have had a long day. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I, I don't know about his internet connection, man.
But let's dive right in. What is Islamic finance?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier on, this is We must understand that two parallel runs, right, of finance. The Western view of finance and potentially the Islamic view, right? So the Western view of finance is risk and rewards, right? Who bears the risk? Who gets the rewards, right? And it's based on rules that if I put capital or if I support a business, then I should get the most amount of rewards based on the risk that I put in. From an Islamic perspective, uh, it is more risk sharing and reward sharing. A lot of people have opined that it's a more just and equitable means of financing, right? Or getting access to finance. And that concept of, for example, murabaha or the Sharia financing is always about sharing and not extracting maximum value, right? So, the notion of riba, which is interest, right, which is disallowed in any lending. According to the Islamic finance rails, for example, it is stated up front that is a sharing of risk and then potentially rewards, right? So it's a very just and equitable system, and a lot of scholars, a lot of industry people that I've spoken to over the years, the last 5 years especially, have touted the Islamic finance path as a more just, more equitable, more transparent financing or financial system, right? And I don't think we should discount the importance or the traction that has got, for example, with the raising of bonds, right? The Islamic sukuk, which is the relevant, the similarity to the Western version of the bonds. And why is that so popular? Why is that raised so much money, right? There's an outstanding of almost 1 trillion USD worth of bonds in sukuk out there in the market. How did we raise such amount of funds, right, with this Islamic system as opposed to the general Western version of bonds? Vaibhav,
You
back
know,
to you.
yeah, you know, what I understand about Islamic finance is that, for example, if I'm financing this phone, for example, this is $1,000. So they buy this phone for me, but then they sell it to me for like $1,200. Am I correct with the understanding?
Yes, in a sense that the way they structured is that whatever interest or profits are built into that contract, right? And it's fixed, it's transparent. Yeah. So that at the end of the day, you're going to pay, for example, like you said, 1,200 for the phone. And every month over 5 years, what are you paying for? Right? As opposed to, for example, the Western system which says the BLR, the base lending rate, will change this way, that way, inflation will go this way, that way, and I might end up, from a 5% to pay 12% based on what's happening, right? And that has happened before to a lot of the Western countries, right? And the banks foreclose because you cannot pay because the interest rates has gone up. So not the value of the property that you first financed on, for example, but because of whatever the global situation is, interest rates have gone up. The banks have hiked up the rates. You've seen what the euro is doing today, European Union, and so on and so forth. They're hiking up rates. Then you end up paying more for the same loan, right? But in Islamic finance, you fix it. At the end of 5 years, 1,200 is what you pay, and every month what you pay.
That is, I think that actually gives us a lot of clarity. No hidden fees, and you know how we say that the banks kind of keep you like a prisoner for life on the
Yeah.
loans.
So it's risk
And
and reward sharing, right? So I think that's really important.
but can smart contracts and blockchains truly embed Sharia principles in terms of ownership, risk rewards, better than traditional structure? Do they just create a new form of uncertainty and complexity that scholars will always have to chase?
I think in life we need to have choices, right? Uh, and that's true for the food that we eat, the schools that we attend, whatever, the cars that you choose. There must be choices, right? And to say that, a Western promoted sense of finance is the way forward, and this has been true from maybe two, three, 400 years ago, is the only way forward, uh, could be misleading, right? I think if you look at the Ottoman Empire, if you look at the other great Muslim empires, they had their own way of financing even back then, based on Islamic principles, right? That were hundreds of years in the making, right? So if you think about it, then I think we should have a choice. And I think Malaysia has done a great job, not because I'm Malaysian, but because they moved very quickly almost 20 years ago in saying that Islamic finance, uh, from a jurisprudence point of view, from a financial institutional point of view, makes sense, right? And there should be an alternative, there should be a choice for people. So if you look at even the big banks, and I give you just two examples, Standard Chartered, HSBC, and there are many others, by the way, who have done sukuk issuances, right? Whose Islamic finance business has grown tremendously over the years, right? There's even a sukuk trading on the London Stock Exchange, right? That shows you the appetite and interest in terms of these instruments that are based on Islamic finance.
Let's talk about, many uh, current RWA projects claim to be asset backed, like gold and real estate, mines, so on and so forth. In an Islamic context, how many are genuinely productive assets versus sophisticated instruments that still carry riba like characteristics or excessive speculation like the meme coins?
This is actually a really interesting point. No? So, in Islamic finance, or what we would call Sharia-compliant finance, okay, um, it's really how it's positioned is that it's an ethical financial system, right? Ethical financial system that frowns upon or prohibits interest, or what we say riba, right? And you will know this, right? So there's no interest, there's no usurpers, there's no riba. Number two, it is excessive uncertainty or speculative assets, which is what we call gara, right? So there's riba, right? Prohibits riba against excessive uncertainty, especially like gara, and there should not be investments in forbidden industries such as alcohol and gambling. These are the three key tenets, right, of Islamic finance or Sharia compliance. And you're absolutely right, it should be asset backed, right? For example, you want to buy a car or you want to buy a house, it's a murabaha financing, for example, because it's asset backed. I want to buy a car. That car can be financed without riba. There's no excessive uncertainty because the car is there, and it's not alcohol or gambling because it's a mode of transportation, and therefore in the most simplest terms it can be done. Now for RWA slash digital assets slash crypto, for example, we apply the same principles. The principles matter. So when you talk about real world asset tokenization, then I would posit that if it's not involved in gambling, if it's not involved in alcohol, there's no excessive riba, uncertainty, it's real world backed assets like property and car, then you can fractionalize it. Then you can do something with it. So there's been some frowning around Bitcoin per se or algorithmic currencies, for example, because what is it backed by? There's no real asset behind it. And a lot of people are very speculative. Like, uh, I'm just saying, right? Look at the whiplash of where Ethereum, Bitcoin, and all that has been over the last 2 weeks. What is that based on? What is the underlying assets behind it? I leave that open to the audience, to you, to look at it.
This actually reminds me that there is another very interesting gentleman who I think lives in Malaysia. His name is Saifuddin, who has written the Bitcoin Standard. He talks a lot about how Bitcoin is also uh, in the Islamic point of view. I would love to get him. I don't know about it, so I can't really get into the details of it since it's clearly a sensitive subject, and I would love to bring in experts like Raymond, like Saifuddin in the future to have these conversations that could potentially reach hundreds of thousands of people, and they are aware of where they are dabbling and what is the use. So I'm glad you bought up tokens like Bitcoin and Ethereum. This gives us all an understanding in terms of the direction uh, that we want to move in as an individual choice. Let's talk about public blockchains, which are permissionless and decentralized by design. Now, Islamic finance requires a scholar oversight, a fatwa approval, and an ongoing compliance. Can these two worlds truly coexist at scale, or will one or the other will always look at compromise at some part of the journey?
This is such an interesting question. Very interesting, right? I think as Islamic finance or Sharia compliant finance developed over the years, so did jurisprudence over that, Sharia compliant finance, right? Like, what exactly is murabaha? What is mudarabah? What is musyarakah? What is ijara? I mean, these are all principles that were developed around Islamic finance, right? And there was jurisprudence around the scholars, around the practitioners, and so on and so forth, right? And I think it's so interesting that the jurisprudence have developed so far ahead, right? So, as we talk about this, what you just said just now, I'm sure uh, the likes of INSIEF in Malaysia, the Islamic Development Bank, for example, who also has a center of excellence in Malaysia, and the rest are looking at evolving the jurisprudence around Islamic finance, right? Because, like you rightly pointed out, uh, what is the source of the regulations? Could a central bank of a country issue Sharia compliant regulations, or does that need the compliance and the collaboration with a fatwa, right? Because it's inherently a principle, Islamic principle, right? So this is interesting. So that's why, for example, Labuan, for example, the others I see all that have advisors, right? Sharia compliant, Sharia advisors on their board when you talk about Islamic products, because you want to be really in line with Islamic principles, right? And I think that's a great evolution, alongside Western finance, because Western finance has come up with this thing now called Bitcoin, you know, this currency, real world assets. And so, like I said earlier on, there's also a parallel system called the Sharia compliant finance, and that is based on a trust, based on equitable, based on other religious principles, right? And so that needs jurisprudence to also evolve to set the guidelines.
in interesting in the way you explain this, but the tokenization, it promises us fractional ownership and broader access to prime real estate, sukuk as you mentioned, or commodities for every day Muslims. Will it actually reach the masses, or will we lost him here? We lost him. We lost him. Okay, he's back. Raymond is back. One second, one second, one second. I need to get you up on stage. One second, one second. Yes, welcome back.
Took a coffee break. No, no.
Well, that was quick. I was saying the RWA promises fractional ownership and a larger access, to real estate, sukuk, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
commodities, to everyday Muslims. Will it actually reach the masses, or it will just be a community, or will it also benefit the institutions and the HNIs while creating liquidity-driven speculation? Like, where are we going to see this?
So you've okay. So what I can say is this, right? You've seen unit trust. You've seen the REITs. In my mind, those are fractionalization already, right? The REITs offer, or the ETFs, for example, offer you entry into markets, into a property class, into something, right? That is aggregated, right? So the REITs, for example, put 10 properties, 20 properties, whatever, and you can structure it in such a way that it meets Islamic finance, Sharia-compliant finance system, right? No riba, no excessive gambling, profit, and speculation. And you get it. And so if you look at the Islamic Unit Trust, for example, in Malaysia, you have the Amanah Saham, Bumi Putra, and many others, right? They're doing very, very well. Very well. Now, if you take that principle and put it into real world assets, tokenization, and if you apply the same principles around it, right? Because it's asset backed. For example, gold, right? You have 1 kilogram of gold and you say, listen, I want to fractionalize it. I want to tokenize this 1 kilogram of gold. I'm going to sell it at, $10, whatever it is, to X amount of people, right? And as long as you follow the Islamic principles around, no excessive speculation, non-gambling, and no interest. And I'll give you a profit sharing. Right? If the gold goes up, you get a share of it. If the gold goes down, you share in the loss of it, right? But that's the risk and reward that we share, right? Then you can tokenize it, right? But it must be backed by real world assets.
But is this also available for people outside the Muslim community?
Oh, yes, very much so. So if you look at the sukuks that are being put out there, it's not necessarily, my home loan is Islamic financed home loan from Maybank, right? Why do I do it? I know very clearly what the end game is after 25 years, right? What am I paying? What is it every month? I don't care whether it's inflation or not, whether the world goes upside down. I know what I'm paying. And if I want to pay it off earlier, it's a very just and equitable system in terms of what am I getting back in return. For example, very transparent. You know what you're getting yourself into, right? So a lot of the sukuks, a lot of the Islamic finance products are not necessarily bought by Muslims. It is again, like I said, an alternative system to the Western system, yeah? Just equitable based on principles, right?
Very interesting. Very interesting. Uh, Out of curiosity, but if somebody wants to take a personal loan, does Islamic Finance has uh, something for personal loans, like for whatever I want to do on my own, like for whatever reason?
I'm sure there is. I am not entirely sure which it will fit into, but it probably be something like the Mudaraba or so, right? Or the Musharaka, which is really a joint venture where both parties contribute capital to a project. So that's a bit different, right? So the Musharaka is definitely not it. But the Mudaraba, for example, is where one party provides the capital, the other party provides the labor or management, for example, right? So if you structure it in such a way of personal finance, where I'm doing something, I'm working, and so on and so forth, it could be, right? But you always go back to the principles. And that's what I like about Islamic and Sharia compliant financing.
Interesting. Interesting the way this is, and I'm glad that it's not just limited to people in the Islamic community, but also to the world, and but also to the people across that want to be aware. Because we have been saying that banking is a scam, that is why the way towards decentralization is. But I think uh, maybe henceforth, I would also say that banking is a scam, and the solutions is decentralized finance and Islamic finance. Would it be correct to for me to say this?
Oh, that's a big statement, man. Vaibhav. That's a big, big statement. You know,
I'm asking. Yeah. What do you think?
um, so devil's advocate, right? Devil's advocate. I think Islamic finance has proven itself to coexist alongside the Western notion of finance, right? And if you see throughout the boom and bust cycles, Vaibhav, as you can see over the last 20 years, with what happened over the property crisis, the banking crisis, the Asian financial crisis, perhaps it's a lot of over lending, perhaps it's a lot of greed, perhaps it's a lot of unawareness about what you can get yourself into that has triggered a lot of this, right? Islamic finance, on the other hand, like I said, is based on a lot of principles. Three key principles which I shared earlier on, right? And you know transparently what you're getting yourself into, right? So on that basis, I think it has got a lot more way to go with the right sort of awareness and marketing. In the Western countries, for example, I don't think we need to worry about countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Middle East, right? I think a lot of them have gone into this space. But the Western countries, I think, need a bit more education that this is not terrorism financing. This is not a religious based financing. It is a principle based, Sharia compliant financing, right? I think that's very, very important, right? To understand. Number two, whether it could rival, the current banking system, I think it could. I think it really could. And for emerging markets like Web3, blockchain, uh, I think the fortune favors the bold, right? If you work together with the likes of the Islamic Development Bank and other like INCF for the jurisprudence and the structures around this new currency, which is really by Vaibhav an alternative to fiat. It's an alternative to the Western banking system, right? And we have decentralized finance. And perhaps if you take out the greed, the speculation, and put in some principle based financing, uh, who knows where it may go.
Wow. I'm kind of blown and embarrassed at the same time because I don't think I've ever paid attention to Islamic finance. And I think this call of ours or this live stream of ours could be a wake up call for me to kind of pay attention to this. And I hope all the viewers on all the various platforms should pay attention to this because uh, how Raymond speaks about uh, this system, but you have also spoken as trust as an infrastructure, which
Yeah.
is I think. May sound philosophical, but is actually the truth, right? I think trust is the basic infrastructure of human life, of anything that we do. But if custody and legal enforcement or the oracle failure happens in the tokenized Islamic assets, does this create a bigger systematic risk than the traditional Islamic finance structure?
Good question, good, really good question. Um, so we've seen what happened to FTX, right? We've seen what happened to now the raiding of wallets, right? Whether it's North Korean actors or whatever actors that's been blamed or unduly pulled in. I think that's a good point. Uh, so in building the trust infrastructure, right? Are we adhering to principles or are we adhering to tech? You know, is it trust by design or is it tech by design? Right. So whichever T you choose, will define whether your trust is broken, right, or whether your tech is broken. But when tech is broken, then trust is broken, right? So do you design your Web3, your blockchain, on the latest, say, L2, whatever based, whatever it is, right? Or do you say, listen, I want to go by trust-based principles here, and those principles means one, two, three. And I don't want to be prescriptive on this call, right? Because there could be an Islamic-based trust layer for Web3. I don't know what it means. Because right now, if you look at all the infrastructure players, the foundations, they're building, right? They are all the Ethereum, Solana, you name it, right? They got we talk about zero, layer zero, for example, right? But what does that mean? We talk just about interoperability and so on and so forth. But for me, layer zero could be the trust layer, right? And then we build in trust by design based on principles. There's no greed. You know what you're getting. There's full transparency in what you get. That could be an interesting option, Vaibhav. I've not seen that happen yet.
On the same lines, many project claims Sharia by design, right? But in practice, we are not really sure about it. Do you think, uh, like in restaurants, we see a halal certificate? Do you think is there any any project like that in play, or do you think it will add more value? Because whenever we see a website and they say, okay, for example, Sharia compliant, or for example, uh, that they practice Islamic finance, but how do we verify it?
So, like, you're right. So halal certification for restaurants, for example, in Malaysia or any other places, are certified by the authorities, right? So in Malaysia, the halal certification is given out by JAKIM, right? And this, it's a very strenuous process, from what I understand. Very, very serious in terms of its audit. Yeah. And so even non-Muslim premises want to take the halal certification because in Malaysia, close to 70% of the population is Muslim, right? And a lot of visitors that are coming in, from other places, from the Arab countries, all that are Muslim. And they want to know that the food that they have is halal certified, right? Not only no lard, no alcohol, no pork, but it's cooked in a halal manner, prepared in a Sharia compliant manner, right? And so then you open your market because it's good manufacturing practice. It really is good manufacturing practice, right? So people opt for the halal certification, right? And for me, if you put that on chain and then you put that on a registry and a QR code, then anybody can scan you at a particular restaurant and see whether you're updated, whether it's latest, whether you fulfill all the requirements, and see the Google reviews, right? Now, that concept has also now been carried into hospitality, into hotels, for example, right? People want to know whether the hotels are staying halal compliant, whether it's all kosher or not, right? And so the Malaysian Islamic Tourism Council (MITC), from what I understand, is also looking at certifying hospitality outlets, hotels, and so on, right? And global, not just Malaysia. So there's a chain of restaurants or hotels, for example. You can go and stay and say halal certified, right? Can you extend that to other areas? I'm sure you can, but I think the audit process can be quite strenuous, lah, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, I think the whole payment infrastructure, like from end to end, whether you're paying for a school or you're going to a school that's halal certified, you're eating at a restaurant, you're staying at a hotel, uh, you know, uh, I think it depends on the country, right? Or depends on the jurisdiction, how far you want to take it. But I think
That actually.
most importantly, bro, is the interoperability also of the halal certification, right? Because we know from one country to another they have different rules, but there must be certain. I think, in my opinion, my humble opinion, there should be a set of interoperable rules that if you go to Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, for restaurants and hotels and certain things that the halal certification speaks to a common standard.
So I think the same thing even for Web3 will make a lot of sense, right? if we have something that says actually, we are Sharia compliant? Do
I
we
think
have
so.
anything? Do we have anything like that?
Uh, Interoperability, I am not sure, but the recognition of our halal certification, the Malaysian Jakim certification is global, right? That's global. A lot of countries recognize the Malaysia certification.
Interesting. I have a friend of mine from Australia. Even she's in the RWA space, and she's written a, I think has a question. I'll read it out for you. I heard almost 50% Malaysians are excluded from traditional investment markets. But if we could make direct asset tokenization available for the retail, that could change the entire economy participation. What are your thoughts on this? Currently, most tokenized products in Malaysia are funds or traditional finance products for wholesale investors. In Malaysia, government improving regulation for direct asset tokenization rather than funds or SPVs or REITs for real estate.
I think it's a really interesting view, interesting suggestion. Uh, we would have to also go. Okay, so let's look at, for example, the tolls, the roads, the highways that we have in Malaysia, right? Very, very good highways in Malaysia. Vaibhavv, you've
Yes,
been here, you've seen it,
it's
right? The
beautiful.
infrastructure,
Yeah.
yeah, airports, trains, roads, amazing, right? And then again, I may be controversial here. I'm just saying we have to pay for it. Fair enough, right? It's a 30-year concession, whatever it is, we're paying good money, good business for the concessionaires because they take the risk upfront. So let's think about it, right? We say, okay, let's tokenize the North-South Highway. That's a real asset. There's no speculative play. We share the risk and rewards, right? Because those guys are making maybe 10, 15% a year, right? For the tolls. The cost is sunken in, they get a 30% concession. Now, just think about it, right? The toll operators, the road highway operator says, okay, I want to unlock capital, right? Not just so now it's worth 2 billion. I built it at 700 million. Now it's 2 billion. Let me tokenize it. Let me fractionalize it. I want all Malaysians not to pay toll anymore. But I need my capital so that I can build the next road, the next railway, the next infrastructure, whatever it is, right? But you got yields of 10 to 15%. So I open it up. I want to raise 2 billion. Valuation is say one, whatever. Say valuation is 1 billion. I want to raise 900 million because you want to leave something on the table, right? So I tokenize this. You get yields of say 7 to 10%, whatever it is, on a Sharia compliant. Would people go directly into it? Say your tokens are 10 ringgit, 20 ringgit, 100 ringgit. I think a lot of people will go into it because you abolish tolls. Now I don't have to pay the toll every time I travel on the highway. It's bought over. The guy's got his money back. He unlocks his asset value. I don't have to pay the toll, right? Anymore. I get to ride it for free. And my tokens now can be exchanged on an exchange like Luno or whatever it is, right? For example. I'm just saying that it needs to be thought through. It needs to be thought through. But just giving you an example of, yeah, what your friend said could be something that could be looked at.
Interesting. And is it true that 50% of the Malaysians are excluded from the traditional investment markets?
Oh, I don't have those numbers, honestly, Vaibhav. I don't have it with me right now. Could be true, so I can't comment on that.
Fair, fair. Let's now talk about in Islamic finance, the assets has to be real, owned, and productive.
Yeah.
Uh, how can current tokenized RWA meet that standard? I know we spoke about this, but is it just like a versus a wrapper traditional instruments, or blockchain language will still be carried out during this speculation or riba like cash risk?
Again, I think, forgive me, it sounded like a broken record perhaps, but it's very clear, right? It needs to be real assets, right? It needs to be real assets. And then uh, how you look at it is that how you package it could be there must not be interest, right? Money cannot simply make money, right? Cannot, right? Uh, the financial transactions there uh, mostly should be tied to a genuine economic activity or underlying assets, right? So it's not just I put money inside and I get 20% from it, right? Cannot. That money must be put into a genuine economic activity or as an underlying asset. That's number one. Number two is risk sharing, right? So I said this earlier, right? Both parties, the banks and the guy who takes the money, takes the risk and reward of the venture. So if the price of the house drops because of a global crash, too bad, right? I continue paying the sum that I agreed to pay over 10 years, but the value of the house drop doesn't mean I pay more money, right? We share that. So the debt and the risk burden cannot be just on the borrower, right? Number three is ethical investing, and I said that earlier just now, right? So the investments that the bank takes cannot be then put into socially harmful activities, for example, right? If we just follow the principles, then whatever wrap that you put around it would be then Sharia compliant. In essence, that's what it is.
So you mentioned Malaysia has got a 43 billion RWA opportunity by 2030.
Yeah,
What needs to happen in policy, infrastructure, or ecosystem for this, for this number to be achieved?
very good point. So we just had the national blockchain policy approved, right? That'll be announced very soon. So within that policy, of course, we work with the central bank, the Securities Commission, many other stakeholders. Uh, and in there, we are looking to see what are the frameworks required for RWA to be recognized alongside the mainstream Western financial system from an Islamic point of view. Now, real world asset tokenization right now, for example, tokenizations of sukuk, tokenization of debt, which is factoring, for example, are already being done, right? So the trials, the real examples have been rolled out, right? And I think over the next 1 year after this policy paper is announced and there's more clarity, then I will see a slew of activities around this space. The legal
Interesting.
framework and certainty, I think, is important. The tax treatment is another.
Julia says cashback on tolls plus others based on percentage owned. She likes the idea. So hope it goes mainstream soon. Let's now talk about uh, from the collaboration perspective, right? Now Malaysia is doing so much. Um how should Malaysia, maybe UAE, Saudi, think about collaborating versus competing in becoming the global hubs for Sharia compliant RWA? What specific advantages does each ecosystem bring onto the table? What do you think?
Interesting point. I think it would begin with my view, my view
Yeah, yeah.
is there could be a global body that looks at the intersect of Islamic jurisprudence and finance, okay, evolving finance methodologies. And that could be someone like the Islamic Development Bank. It could be, right? Where all parties or most Islamic nations, have a share in the Islamic Development Bank, right? Like the Asian Development Bank and so on and so forth, right? So there could be a role to play in terms of what are the standards and how we recognize treatment of RWA, for example, right? In Saudi, in UK, in Nigeria, in Malaysia, Indonesia. Right now, there isn't, right? Everybody is enacting their own look or not, or prohibiting outright RWAs as speculative, right? So if there's a body that now sets the standards, like your Financial Reporting Authority, the IFRCS, and then all of these guys, right? Standards are key, Vaibhav. Standards are key because it provides interoperability globally as well as certainty to get into a particular area, right? So I do think there's some thinking around the jurisprudence and real world around standards, interoperability of those standards, enforceability of those standards could be a catalyst.
Interesting. And for builders and project investors looking in this space right now, especially in the UAE, Gulf, Malaysia corridor, what are the most practical and high potential business modules or entry points that they can look at capturing for the real growth?
Oh, the world is your oyster, man, guys. The world is your oyster. I mean, lots of things going on, right? So uh, I would posit anything around environment, especially around carbon capture, carbon credits, around climate change, would be a huge area of growth from now on, right? Um Gen Z, Gen whatever we are, Gen Alpha, whatever, our children are a lot more sensitive to what's going on around us, right? It's not just building and building and building. Um, so that could be a huge area, right? That if I want to build something, a project, think about it around climate, around SDG, social, development, sustainable development goals, and what is going on, right? That ends in 2030 according to the UN, but it's not going to stop. I think that momentum has continued to build on. The second thing I think that we need to or could potentially look at is around food security. What are we doing around food security, right? Uh, Critical as we hit, 7.8 billion, 8 billion, whatever, 9 billion population, the have and have nots, exacerbated by climate change, will have severe problems with food security, right? So, what are you building around farm to table, right? What kind of blockchain solutions, Web3 solutions, financing solutions can you build around this? Would also be, I think, a very interesting area.
In I think this conversation has been a big eye opener for me in terms of the way there's another parallel world working that I absolutely had no idea of, and even if I did, it was as good as like I didn't have any idea or any understanding. Um just the last question that I want to ask, a couple of last questions. Beyond technology and regulation, what mindset or ecosystem shifts are required for RWA plus Islamic finance to move from interesting plots and ideas to a true mega trend that delivers measurable economy impact at scale?
I do think that a sort of a one-stop shop, you know, I'll leave it whether it's an EY consultancy or whatever consult, but a one-stop shop that you can go to and say, dude, I got 100-acre farm. Dude, I got a house. Dude, I got a whatever it is, a community, right? Uh, and my faith or not, I want to cater to a population that is looking at ethical based financing, for example, right? So we don't have to use the word Islamic finance or Sharia compliant finance because then half of them who are not will say, no, I don't want to get into this, right? But ethical financing, right? I think the terminologies and how we label this is also as important as getting it done. Then you go to a one stop center to say, either I want to be an investor or I got something that people can invest in. How do I do this? What are something that can be done? If there's a one stop center or centers around a country or a region or a world, uh, that could be really quite powerful. And it could be part of Standard Chartered or HSBC or whatever you call it, right? Or somebody wants to start it separately. Then I
Interesting.
think that is important, because then there's some help, clarity, and I go back towards standards. What are the standards that need to be met? You have to have a pre-qualification to meet, say, the JAKIM standards or whatever the halal standards that is set globally, right? Then whatever assets you have, whether it's a stock, whether it's a bond, whether it's a house, whether it's your gold in your house, then you can see how to fractionalize that, get that tokenized, and get the world to invest in you. And on the reverse, we can also invest in other properties around the world.
Well, as I said earlier, this has been a really eye-opening conversation, uh, and there is just one thing that I want to ask you: is that for every kid in this world who is perhaps not sure what's going to happen in this space, what is a piece of suggestion that you would like to give them?
You know,
And
it's
especially
a,
the way the world is moving and everybody's looking at AI, and I don't think anybody's paying attention to Islamic finance right now.
I'll just give you a snapshot, right? My kids, my twins are 13, a boy and a girl, right? I got a daughter who's 9 years old. Keeps me young. I'm jaded, right? But these guys, my daughter believes in everything that is, so she's into swimming, she's into this, she's into nature, she loves it. My son, on the other hand, build stuff online. He believes that everything will be online, right? He wants to become a game developer, a programmer. He's in that space. He wants to see how AI works. So, when we were, Vaibhavv, you must be only 35, 40, man. I outrank you. When I was there, we say, oh, let's do law, let's become this, let's do that, and all that, right? By the time it's your time, you're probably looking at all this alternative finance. But I think kids are also looking at a parallel world and utopian world where there's no Straits of Hormuz or there's no Ukraine, Russia, a more utopian world that they can interact with. You know, I don't know, things have changed, and that could be the way forward, right? So my vantage point, I said, don't stop dreaming that you can make the world a better place, whether it's a digital twin of your current world or the reverse, where you can make your world a better place, number one. And number two, I think always have hunger for knowledge. Things are changing so fast, right? Above every 6 months, things are changing. And you must try and grasp that knowledge and internalize it to make the world a better place.
Thank you so much for your time and for everything that you have mentioned. This is absolute fantastic learning for all of us out here. Thank you so much for your time, and we will love to have you back and discuss more on this and see how we can make this a better place.
Hey, thank you for having me, and I apologize for all your listeners because I was late and dropped out, man. Apologies for
No,
that. Have a great
no, no.
Friday and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you so much. And we are going to be back in a couple of hours with Michael Topin, the godfather of crypto, as called by CNN. The conversation is going to be about the market, what happened in the last week. So come back for that conversation. Thank you, Raymond, once again.
Cheers. Bye
Cheers.
bye.
Thank you.